Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Spoil Your Baby podcast. I'm Dr. Greer Kirshenbaum, and today I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Rocio Zunini. And today we're diving into a pretty amazing, fascinating, incredible topic. I think this made me fall in love with neuroscience and this entire field of development. And it's a topic that's really central to infant development, and that is a sensitive period.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this topic because we have very interesting things to share with parents today about it. So, yeah, let's start with defining what is a sensitive period.
Yeah.
A sensitive period is a specific window of time during development when the brain is very, very sensitive to particular experience. So, it's a special time when the brain is extra malleable and it's like wet clay that is ready to be shaped. And in this case, the hands are is ourselves, is the environment, right? For our babies. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, maybe we can talk about some interesting findings from neuroscience, Greer.
Yeah, completely. So, there's often, we use that clay analogy, which I think, it's not perfect, but it does demonstrate the general idea of a sensitive period, right? And so if you think when a brain or an area of the brain is in a sensitive period, it's like you said, it's that the clay is soft and easy to mold. And it's such a great analogy for infancy because the infant brain is like this wet clay. It is super responsive to experiences. The experiences that babies have are literally shaping their brain, right? Both in that macro sense, like how we would think of a ball of clay, but also on a very, very microscopic level of neuronal connections, circuitry, proteins, receptors, intercellular signaling. You could get really, really, really microscopic. We're making a huge impact during these sensitive periods, right? And the reason why they're called sensitive periods is because when they're over, they're a period of time. I always talk about infancy as a season. It's a season of this incredible plasticity. But when the sensitive period's over, just like how clay will harden and no longer be easy to manipulate after a sensitive period of development, the brain similarly is no longer easily changed. And it doesn't mean it's never going to be changed again. It's not like we can ever work on those circuits and change them and refine them because we know we can. There's countless numbers of therapeutic modalities that we engage in that are, they're becoming more and more incredible and effective, right? So we can definitely change the brain, but we're really laying down the foundational structures of the brain during sensitive periods in development.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, it's incredible, incredible. So let's start with vision. This is like where most of us in school, in our neuroscience programs, would have ever heard of this. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. Don't you think?
Totally. Yeah, I remember this. Yeah, probably first year in the neuroscience program. There is Hubble and Whistle in the 1960s, where when they study critical periods in vision, and they just keep kittens. But can you explain a little bit, Greer, what they did?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually wrote one of my big papers in my undergraduate degree on this.
Oh
I
yeah.
was going to get it to show everybody. I'll show you.
Oh.
I'll bring it out another time. But yeah, so if you prevent one eye from receiving visual input during a sensitive period in early development, right? In this case, it was in kittens in their early life. Their brain's visual system is permanently altered. So going back to the clay, when the experience comes in through the eye during the sensitive period, it has a huge impact on shaping the visual parts of the brain. But when that sensitive period passes and the clay hardens, that part of the brain, it's really hard to change later on, right? So If you remove, an eye patch, for example, after the sensitive period, that part of the brain, it's not going to wire the way it would during the sensitive period.
And this is why, for example, like there is a cross eye situation. These are treated very quickly, right? So that the
Absolutely
vision can develop properly.
Yeah, that's so important for parents to have that getting taken care of very, very early, right? Yeah, absolutely. So another system that we often also learn in our undergrad, really well documented, is the auditory system, our hearing and language systems.
Yes.
It also shows us how amazing our brain is at learning from the environment. You want to take us through a little bit of that?
Yeah, this is something I know a little bit more of because when I went into my PhD and then postdoc, I specialized in language. And so, yeah, I was fascinated by this finding. And did you know that when babies are born, their brains can distinguish between all possible speech sounds in all human language, like any sound, any phoneme. And there's about 800 distinct phonemes, lots. But by their first birthday, their brains are already specialized to recognize only the sounds they regularly hear. I have seen this too, like in action when I work at the BAS Center on Cognition, Brain, and Language, when there is a baby language lab, and they put them through all kinds of situations for hearing, and the babies were like, like yes, no, it's just so funny, these experiments, because
That's amazing.
because they put like sort of weird stuff once they learn to specialize, and they'll put like, no, that's not right, or like the babies will go like so
That's so fun. Yeah. I had an experience with that when I was traveling after high school. I was in Vietnam and we were on a train and with some really nice Vietnamese people, and we were all laughing so hard for hours because we were trying to teach them to pronounce some English words and they were trying to teach us to pronounce some Vietnamese words. And it was so funny because we would say a word or they would say a word and the other person could not tell the difference between the phonemes. Like we'd be like, la, or, whatever it was. And they could not hear it and they could not repeat it. And same thing, they would say a sound and we could not hear it and we could not repeat it. It was hilarious.
Yeah, totally. We completely like become absolutely blind to this, to these sounds. And also then at the same time, we had like me, for example, you can hear, right? Like I'm not a native speaker of English, so I have an accent. And no matter how hard I try, there are some sounds that are never going to come out exactly as a native speaker. And again, this is because of the sensitive periods during language development.
When did you start to learn English?
Oh my God, as an adult, I was like 22 or something, so very late.
Yeah. And so for parents out there who want their children to be bilingual, and there's nothing wrong with having an accent either, but if you do have multiple languages in your culture and in your family, it's really ideal for babies to hear all of these phonemes in their sensitive period.
Yeah.
And so that is under 10 months. Patricia Kuhl's lab has shown us that if we want babies to hear all the phonemes of multiple languages, they need to be exposed quite a bit. I've seen this in families where one parent will speak one language and another parent will speak another language to the child. And that works quite well. Or there's another family member or someone who's speaking the other language to the child. And so that they do learn all these phonemes under 10 months.
Yeah.
And when you do that, that language gets encoded into the primary language parts of the brain.
Yeah.
But if we learn a language later, it has its own pathway.
So it's
bit harder.
Yeah, and
right?
I'm an example. My kids are an example. We speak English and Spanish at home because my husband is Canadian, and they're perfectly bilingual. Like they speak perfect Spanish with the R's. They can roll their R's, and then they can speak perfect English as well.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So I love to use these examples before we get into the emotional system,
Mm-hmm.
just to demonstrate to people, right, what a sensitive period is, right? With vision, we have to have the correct vision input to wire the brain only in that early time of life for, our languages and our phonemes, hearing and speaking certain sounds have to be presented before 10 months of age to come out, as sounding like a native speech, or hearing. And our emotional brains are also this way. It's a bit more complex, our emotional brains. It involves multiple brain regions, right? We always talk about those big ones, right?
Yeah.
Hippocampus, amygdala, hypothalamus, prefrontal cortex.
Yeah. So let's go through each one. This is our
Yeah, tell us
favorite.
about the
Yeah, the
hypothalamus.
emotional system is our favorite part. This is really what we're here for in this podcast. So yeah, let's break down these parts from the system. So tell us about the role of the hypothalamus.
Yeah, the hypothalamus. You could think of it sort of like, in my book, I talk about it as sort of a gas pedal, right? For stress, it releases the stress into the body. Other ways of thinking of it is that it could be like a conductor of the orchestra, of the stress orchestra, right? So during infancy, depending on the experiences a baby has, the amygdala learns what type of stress response is sort of going to be that baby's set point, that baby's normal stress response. So, if a baby experiences frequent stress with inconsistent soothing or low amounts of soothing and comfort, their stress system might get programmed to be very high, have a very high baseline, so that baby will then go on for the rest of their life to produce much higher levels of hormones, stress hormones like cortisol, experiencing bigger stress. And we know that can have a very negative impact on mental health.
Yeah, and then this also affects other brain regions, like the
Yeah,
hippocampus, for example, the amygdala. Let's talk a little bit about that.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. The hippocampus um, has this sort of off switches of the stress response in babies, and so when a baby is not, again, inconsistently soothed or left to cry quite a bit, their hippocampus develops a very low number of off switches for stress. And that means for that person's rest of their life, it's much more difficult to turn the stress off. So the hypothalamus gets set, so the stress is much higher. And then their hippocampus gets programmed, so it's much harder to turn it off, right? It's kind of a double whammy of difficulty for the stress system. It's tough. And then the amygdala gets programmed as well. So when babies have that consistent, beautiful care that we advocate for, their amygdala gets set. So it sort of is setting off the body for threat and stress in a pretty optimal way, real threats. If a baby receives pretty low care, then their amygdala could have a very low threshold to sort of sound off this alarm to the body. And we might have something like generalized anxiety or, feeling multiple threats throughout the day that aren't a true threat to us, right? Again, a problem for mental health, right? To be constantly detecting threats when perhaps they aren't there.
Yes. And then finally, we have the prefrontal cortex that has a very, very long developmental trajectory, right in their mid 20s, still like is finishing its development. So, can you tell us a little bit about that part?
Yeah. The prefrontal cortex is, really not working for babies. It's really, really, really very much in a sensitive period that's much longer than the first three we talked about, right? The hippocampus, hypothalamus, and amygdala are very much in a sensitive period during those first 3 years of life. The prefrontal cortex is too, but its sensitive period is a lot longer. It develops in infancy in those first 3 years, but also all the way up to age 25, actually, is when it finishes maturing. And the prefrontal cortex develops also as an off switch to stress, another pathway to turn stress off. And it develops through co-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell us a bit about this?
Yes, so co-regulation is the thing, right, for the emotional system. This is what is needed for. This is what the sensitive period needs. It needs co-regulation. Basically, is when we lend our nervous system to our babies, our brains to our babies, and through this co-regulation, then their stress system learns to manage stress, but over many years. So it's basically soothing them when they are stressed, right? And they're going to tell us, they're going to show us when they're stressed, and then all we need to do is soothe them in the best way we can. We get to know our babies. We also know what they prefer for soothing. And so like this, co-regulation is the main ingredient for the emotional for the development of the emotional system.
Yeah, I would say it's the most important thing in the sensitive period.
Yes.
It's going to grow all those brain parts we mentioned to be very, very well programmed to handle stress, acute stress and chronic stress. And it's essential, right? It's essential. And it goes right up against that myth of just leave the baby. They have to learn. They have to learn how to handle their stress on their own. They need to grow up. They need to figure it out. And it's really depriving babies of the most essential thing they need from 0 to 3, which is co-regulation, because with it, we're addressing the sensitive period in the most, optimal way to grow a baby's brain for lifelong mental health. So that's the takeaway from today, right? Your baby is in the sensitive period from 0 to 3 years. They're essential emotional brain areas, along with that visual, along with that auditory system, many others as well. They're all developing. And the absolute best thing you can do is understand co-regulation, understand how to accompany your baby in all of their states, actually, of arousal, both the happy, joyful emotions, but also the stressful emotions, and help their brains grow as best as they can.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the end of our episode today. Make sure you check out our professional certification that is coming up very soon, and keep tuning in. We'll be back every Wednesday with an episode.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.